Hello, my friends. So what do you know about money? I've got a variety of books about a lot of different subjects, actually. When I first came to put this video down, I had these stack of books right here, and there's such a sharp contrast between these two stacks of books, because this one is called these are about money and about the Federal Reserve and the system that we live in, and these are all about religion, about Christianity rather. And it's funny that they're in such sharp contrast. It's just I didn't realize it at the time because I brought them out for separate videos. I did want to discuss religion, but I decided to maybe opt out of that one for a while because I don't really have the passion to argue against organized religion. I only have the desire to explain the point of view from someone who's not religious, that not all people who don't believe Christianity is correct, let's say. We're not all atheists, we're not all dumb, we're not all ignorant, just in the same way that all the Christians that I meet aren't ignorant, but a lot of them are. And I've seen just as many dumbass atheists arguing. I mean, I've watched several different videos, over the years, and read several different books and movies and documentaries about the history of religion. And the history of religion is really closely intertwined with the history of money. And the Vatican is, the wealth of the Vatican is extreme. They're losing ground. That actually, a lot of religions are on the decline. Just a few years back, I think it was 9 years ago, before there was the U.S., I think had 79% who associated themselves as Christians. And that dropped down to like 72%. And it's been significantly declining, yet not with the groups you would assume. It's really an interesting story. I mean, when you look at how religion is spread, I did a video a few years back where I really did a deep analysis of religions, of world religions, and I posted them all in bar graphs and in color codes, and I did the U.S. versus the world. And I might have to dig that video up, but it was pretty fascinating to see how many Christians were here in the U.S. that thought that they were really a dominant force versus the rest of the world, and how many Christians are actually out there. It's easy to perceive things a certain way. Maybe that's why I'm so, like when I was talking with my friend earlier about how I can't come to terms on agreeing with the values of others. When people say that like the U.S. is God's chosen country, or we're God's chosen people, it just makes me cringe, because it's not the religion or the beliefs that brought us to where we are as a country. It's the capital. And these two books right here, a total of probably, I don't know, couple thousand pages here, at least 1,500 pages, I guess. This, I just haven't read this yet. This one I've mentioned before, I'll briefly. It's The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, and it's a second look at the Federal Reserve. All I can say about it is that it's a very deep, intricate look at every money family, where all of the money comes from, where it's going, and how the Federal Reserve came into being an entity, and how we got to where we are off the gold standard. Which, if there was ever, a corruption, it would be going off of the gold standard. But this book is one I really wanted, and my wife got it for me for Christmas, and I just started it. It's called Capital by Thomas Piketty. And this book is, I think he was French. He wrote this book, and it stirred shit up big time. In fact, it was the book that coined the phrase. I believe he's the one that coined the phrase the 1%. It was this book that started the Occupy movement. It was the knowledge that was presented here that really got things stirred up big time. And there was a page that I had set aside. I'd been reading it for a while, and I didn't get very far, but it was just phenomenal to see where everything comes from, and how these classes, have waged war on the rest of us. And it's something I've always known, but what do you do? And there was something I wanted to mention, or to read, but I guess it doesn't matter. It's a story about It's a story about greed, you know, and that's the story of history. And religion, by contrast, supposedly was supposed to keep us away from that greed. So here we are, one of the most Christian countries, if not the most Christian country that I know. Well, probably not the most. I think that some of those Latin countries have a lot of Catholics, but I don't know the specifics. But what I do know is for the size of our country, and considering the country we are, and the amount of people who associate themselves as Christian in this country, as well as the amount of money that we pride ourselves on having, and the type of income and progress and what we consider progress and success, it's almost shameful to consider that Jesus, if he ever existed, would ever support such a thing. You know, in fact, if the Jesus of the Bible really did exist and really did say the things that they claim he said, then I bet if he really did come down from the sky right now and come down and land and see what was going on in this world, he would tell the U.S. to give away all these huge companies. Say, what are you doing? You know, you should give that away. And it's not that the Christians own these companies or the Christians are the greedy, because the average Christian is just like me, just another person living their life, doing their own thing. You know, I have no problem with people who are religious. It's the zealots, the one who use religion to control the masses, and that's always been the problem. When they want you to go to war, they'll tell you that God needs you, that we need you, and that you should always support your country, your master, your leader. These are things that we're taught. This is what religion promotes, is believing without question and control. And I know that people who are Christian don't believe that and don't agree with it, but I've seen some of the most detailed, deep arguments coming up between people, and I've watched a lot of these debates with Christians versus atheists, tons of them, because I'm so fascinated by the spontaneous argument that comes when two people are fighting with what they believe to be legitimate ammunition. And the Christian will often come back with, it says it in the Bible, and that seems to be the circular reasoning that never goes anywhere. You would ask how to prove God, and they would say, well, it's in the Bible. You would say, well, then why does the Bible say this, or why does the Bible say that? And you know, I'm not opposed to it. This is why this is fascinating, because, you know, so many different versions. But it's just funny to see these two right next to each other, because this is the Holy Bible, and this is a treasury of science, which was, I don't know how old it is, but it's fascinating to look at the 1943. It's wartime here. Science has just brought us so many phenomenal things and a better understanding of our environment, but at the same time has been used to create the bomb and, you know, evil things, of course, because any tool can be used as a weapon. But generally it's helped us to live longer. So when we talk about this life, we say, well, what has the Christian God done to help us to live better and longer? Or is it something that humans have created through our free will? That's the big question, is free will. Is it God that's brought all these discoveries because he created us, or is it that we've done it on our own free will? And the free will argument goes nowhere. I mean, I've listened to so many hours of philosophy lectures through like these different speakers. I used to just listen to it all day long at work while I was a carpenter, you know. I didn't have to talk to anybody, and I just listened to different people try to explain what free will determinism really were, and all the different philosophers who had their theories, and it goes nowhere. You can't prove it one way or another. You get to the end where you say, well, if we have free will, then we're given the decision to make huge mistakes which could screw us for eternity in this small life. And that mankind has its fingerprint all over the details of the Bible. Oh, well, these kids have to be at the age of accountability. And, well, this passage has to be interpreted this way. And no, it doesn't mean slaves have to obey your masters. It really means just, you know. But it's the hell is always literal. Hell is always the first thing that the intense, you know, evangelical Christians will go to. But hell isn't even a priority in the Bible itself. I mean, sure, we can talk about hell and Satan and devil and whether things are in the Bible and whatnot all day long, but in the end, the priority is always supposed to be love, to focus on the goodness. And so I feel like a lot of folks, it even says, you know, when the Christians are, if you look at some websites where Christians are told how to deal with atheists confronting them, because there are a lot of them, and they'll tell them, don't bring up hell. Don't tell people about hell as if, using that as a weapon or a tool, because people will shut down. And it's true. They say, show them, explain to them that Jesus is love, because Jesus is always the answer to any conflict. When you get into the argument, it's like, well, Jesus wants us to do this. And I think that that's what bothers me about it, if anything. It's that I believe in a Christ consciousness that we're all aware, and as even Jesus said himself, you can all be as great as me, or so it's said in the Bible. But there's no point in us quoting Scripture against something that we don't want to believe in Scripture. Just because if the Christians are going to quote the Bible and non-Christians are going to quote the Bible, how are we going to interpret it in a way that everyone can understand? And which Bible do we use? And how can Old and New Testament people really be so, just divide themselves among lines of the same book? And same thing happened with the Mormons, They decided to come up with their own version. So what I also have here is, of course, besides the Bible, I have the earliest gospel, and that's just one particular. I think it's what, Mark. It's shit. I don't even know. I forget. Anyway, it's Mark. Okay, and these are very interesting things to read, and great stories about people that may or may not have lived, and stories that may or may not exist. The flood. It's just the Epic of Gilgamesh retold. I mean, these things continue to happen and repeat in these patterns and archetypes. But that's the thing, is that religion is a bunch of repeating archetypes throughout the ages that help resonate with the moment that the people are in. But science is durable. You can still test theories from the 1500s and see if they're true or not. And we're often proving things that we used to believe were facts in science to be not true. And it takes science a while to actually, people are stubborn, but finally they bend. They say, okay, the earth goes around the sun. Okay, we get it. And the same thing has to happen with religions. We cannot be interpreting things the way that our grandparents interpreted things. We have grown, so why can't we grow in the way that we interpret the Bible? And why can't a Christian see that it may be metaphors, or at least accept that hell may be a metaphor, that it doesn't make sense to burn for eternity? It's not in the big picture. And then people will argue, well, if God created Satan, then he must not have the power that he says he has. He must not be all-knowing and all-great. And they say, no, he allows him to exist. And they would say, well, why? Well, we don't know. Maybe to allow him to tempt man. But why do we put man into a world of temptation and then test him and go, haha, you're going to hell just because he makes a mistake? And they say, well, that's free will. You have the choice. You say, if we're given free will to think, then aren't we put in the same shoes as what God may be if we were really made in God's image? That the universe has free will to change. That nothing is set in stone. And that means that man's word in the book will always be man's word in the book. My belief is you can't translate God into any terms that are viable. And I was reading an article earlier about a guy who was saying how he was a pastor, I believe, was saying how annoying it was to come up to meet people who claimed to be spiritual. And he said, like, he was on a plane and this guy was saying, that he's spiritual. He's like that he finds God in the sunset, and the guy was saying how stupid it is. He's like, of course everybody sees God in the sunset, but this is different. We're talking about a relationship through a community. And the way he described it was basically saying that your God's not worthy because a whole bunch of other people don't believe it too with you. That you can't create your own reality and your own God and your own heaven. And I say, bullshit. You can. You can. If you really believe that you have to ask Jesus for forgiveness in order to be saved, fine, so be it. But accept that other people may be asking the universe for forgiveness in their own way by acting and being better people. Being a sinner isn't a default of man. Sinning is a perspective choice of what we consider to be good and bad, and good and evil, rather. It's actually the last two I have here. This one is a commentary on the whole Bible. It's so funny. I wouldn't say funny. It's just fascinating that, there are so many of these types of books that go and they pick out every line and try to tell you what they mean. And it's my belief that a book that explains God should be self-evident. It shouldn't have to be translated. But apparently they do, and that's why it's hard for me to see that they have their own views of what every single thing means. It's a fascinating look at the mind of humans, trying to interpret their own books that they wrote, that they claim were God. I'm really trying not to belittle Christians here, and I know that a lot of you may be Christians, and I'm not trying to offend you, but I am trying to give you maybe another viewpoint that if it works for you, so be it. But realize that it's not healthy to look down on others who have a different religion. It's just not. It's not. You can look down on people for believing things that maybe aren't true, but try not to. In other words, I don't look down on Christians. I see them as people who are looking to escape the chaos and frustration of daily life like everyone else. And some were taught from when they were young, and others maybe were reborn, but they found themselves a community, a group. This is what Burning Man is for a lot of people. It's a community, a group that all share values. But people may think Burning Man, for example, is just a bunch of people partying around fires. The truth is there are principles, 10 principles of Burning Man that people follow, leaving no trace. Taking care of each other is important, and that's why people want community. So if they find it through Christianity, so be it. But just try to accept that others have a different faith. That they're not doomed to burn. Because when you look at somebody and think they're doomed to burn for eternity, you have, first off, no evidence whatsoever, not one single shred of proof that anyone burns in hell or that the devil exists. But we do know that people can do negative things. One second. Good thing I was about done anyway. This last one I had was the Science and Health with the Key to the Scriptures by Mary Eddy Baker. Now, this is Christian Scientists. The Christian Scientists, I believe that's what it's called. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's the Christian Science Monitor, I think, is the thing that they publish. It's the first Church of Christ Scientist. There we go. And they have their completely own view of things, and they interpret everything. They're trying to incorporate science into it, so it seems like a step, at least perhaps in the right direction. I can't say that all the solutions here are legitimate, but that it's an interesting approach, and it shows that people are willing to change over time. And if we can't alter our rigid structures about religions, and we can't alter our rigid, understandings of money, because money is one of those things that's consistently integral and wrapped into the whole system. So that's my ramble, and take away from it what you will. I'll talk to you all later. Peace. Have a great day.